starting the recording. Welcome, Stephen. Stephen Colbert will be doing, or Colbert, sorry, will be doing the presentation today. At this moment, we have 15 people on the call. It works best if everybody just keeps their microphone muted. There is a chat box. We will make sure that if people have comments, I will look at them and I will share them with Stephen when there is time for some questions. And I would say, let's get started.
Okay, good evening or afternoon, I guess, depending where you are. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. This is a project that started at our school several years ago, and it's been ongoing since then. And so this is a presentation that has been, bits and pieces have made at different times, but usually in meetings. This is the first time I've presented it as a webinar. So I tried to make it as interactive as possible, the way we would normally do it. We'll see how it works out. But what I would suggest that you do is, yeah, maybe you have a cup of coffee and maybe your dog is on your lap or you're in your pajamas. Don't turn your webcam on. But get a pencil and paper. Have something to write with. Because normally you would have a set of handouts and we would be going through the handouts. Now, you cannot do that. You can open up another window and shop on Amazon, do whatever you want to do. But if you want to get the full, I don't know, effect, I guess, I'm going to ask you to write some things down and make some answers and questions. And we'll see if we can do some of the things interactively. And this was the first one, the warm-up activity. Create an image on paper in your mind's eye of a successful student. So try to be specific about what traits or behaviors that student has. And we'll share those thoughts in a moment. Let's get started. So that's me. The secondary title would be Embedding an Explicit and Intentional Metacognitive Co-Curriculum into grades 9 and 10. And hopefully that'll become more apparent as we move into the presentation. That's not me. But I teach 9th grade earth science, 10th grade chemistry. I've been teaching at this high school about 10 years, and that's all the teaching that I did or have done. Before that, I was in natural resources and consulting and technology transfer, and been doing modeling instruction for about 9 years, and about 5 years as a modeling workshop facilitator. And it shouldn't say metacognition in the classroom, it should say something else. And there we go. It should say chemistry. All right. So what do we hope to achieve? Well, I hope that we get an improved understanding of metacognition, that we get some useful descriptions of metacognitive skills and strategies, things that we've implemented in our school, ideas that you can implement at your school, ways to make this thing work. And some kind of practical model for how we did it. I'll go over how we did it, and then you'll have to figure out how it might work best for your school. So the agenda, we did the warm-up. We'll come back to that. Learning target agenda, a little bit about me coming in and talking about metacognition, and then we'll get into some specific skills and strategies, and then we'll wrap everything up. So let's talk about the warm-up. And Wendy, I'm not sure how this will work. Is there a way for people to do a whiteboard and write on this?
Not in what we're using right now, but I think if people just open up your mic and just talk about it. And
sure, either that or they can add it to the chat. I just don't want everybody walking over everybody else. So either way, and Wendy, let's do it that way. Toss them in the chat, and then Wendy can say words because I'm not monitoring the chat.
Okay, yep, that works.
So ideas about what does a successful student do?
And I hope everybody knows where the chat box is. Yes. Mila says curiosity. Sean says ask questions. Chantel says successful student engages in class discussion, work through failure, diligence, is engaged, willing to take risk, collaborative, practice like it is a test, no shortcuts.
Good. So we'll have that stream documented. And that's what I would do in an interactive session. We would spend some time talking about all of these behaviors of a successful student. And so as teachers, I think we're trying to foster those traits and behaviors. And we view at our school metacognition as a way to try to help arrive at those, allowing students to develop those skills. So a little bit about us, because the way we put together our metacognition program is specific to who we are. And so whatever experience you have is going to be specific to who you are. So I don't want you to try to do what we did unless you look exactly like us. So first of all, we're in early college. And that means that our students will take community college classes beginning in their junior year. They finish their high school program for the most part, except a couple of history classes, after their sophomore year. So our partners are certainly us, Wake County Public School System, the Wake Tech Community College, and then we're affiliated with a health and hospital right behind us, within walking distance of one of our campuses. So that's the first thing to keep in mind is we got a hospital in our backyard, we have community college classes, and then most of our high school classes are done right away. So the other interesting or perhaps hard part about our experience, we got about 300 students, so we're small. That's a good thing. The bad thing is we're on 2 campuses. So on our health science campus, we got about 175 students. That's mostly 9th and 10th, some 11th and 12th, a few super seniors or 13th. And that's almost exclusively high school courses. There's about 7 or 8 teachers that take care of all of that, depending on when you count the college instructor. The students will take one college class as sophomores, and that's college, high school health, take it as a college class. On our northern campus, about 125 students, almost exclusively 11th and 12th, some super seniors, and then it's almost all college classes. So our students can stay a 5th year if they'd like. They can graduate in 4 if they care to. The thing that's tough about it is that's where our campuses are located, 9 miles apart. So once they leave the health science campus, we don't see them very much unless they come back. Most of the time when they come back, it's because they've fallen on their face at the community college campus. So given that background, this is how we view our challenges. On the health science campus is where the high school is. We use what's called the Common Instructional Framework. Perhaps some of you have heard of that. I think Jobs for the Future is doing a lot with it now. When we started using it, it was North Carolina New Schools Project. And it's very, collaborative group work, writing to learn, literacy groups, questioning. It's very focused on interactive student-led classrooms, a lot of inquiry. Well, when they get to college, the 2 design principles on our high school classes, the first one is we have a PULSE class, which is our homeroom, and PULSE stands for participation, understanding, leadership, yada, yada. So every day we see them for about 25 minutes. And the second one is our first semester, they have a class that's called ACA, which is, it's an English class, but it's basically a study skills class. And they get college credit for it, but it's taught by a high school teacher. They do that their first semester freshman year. Now, when they go to college, what does college look like? Lecture, read, write, test. So we're doing all of this stuff with them, and yet when they get to their college classes, they're doing typical college, lecture, read, write, and test. Another thing that we recognize is we have very strong academic assistants. We have an English teacher, a math teacher, and a science teacher on the northern campus that basically don't teach anything. They just do academic assistance. So it's a lot like the instructional learning centers that your college students would go to. What we found was some of our students would not being successful on the northern campus. Some of the students who were struggling on the health science campus got even worse at the northern campus. So we were trying to figure out what can we do to alleviate this problem. And we came up with the students could do the content okay, but they didn't know how to learn. So we decided to change our focus as a group, started with the freshmen, then we did the sophomore the year after that, sophomore teachers. focusing on metacognition. So a little bit of research that just talks about why we did what we did. A number of different studies in the literature have shown that when you try to introduce, or when you introduce metacognition, you can get documented changes in classroom behavior, attitudes, performances. Students become more informed, purposeful learners. So this is what we were seeing and saying, well, we would like to get that. Another study, Hofer and you, same kind of thing. Learning, self-efficacy, cognitive strategy use, decline in test anxiety. So some of these words might have been what came up in our looking at traits and characteristics of successful students. And then finally, there's another study that recognized that metacognitive skillfulness seems to be essential for learning, much more than intellectual ability. And it's important to recognize that they're talking about here the boundary of their knowledge. And so we feel like we're taking 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds and sending them to college. And for the most part, they're operating at the boundary of their knowledge. It's really pushing them. Usually your students have 4 years to get ready for college. Ours have 2. So now let's talk about what is metacognition. I like this Zitz cartoon where some of you may do this as well. You have 3 different blogs, one for expressing your thoughts, one for expressing your thoughts about the thoughts, and the other one writing about the thoughts about your thoughts. And that's what we're trying to get students to do. So the operational definition of metacognition: an appreciation of what one already knows, together with the correct apprehension of the learning task, what knowledge and skills it requires, combined with the agility to make correct inferences about how to apply one's strategic knowledge to particular situations, and to do so efficiently and reliably. That's the best definition I've heard of it. What you already know, together with how to learn, how to apply the learning task. And then you want to be able to make inferences about how to apply learning to a particular situation. So let's take a moment and do the same thing we did before, but this time, what does it look like when your students are doing metacognition? Going back to our traits and behaviors, how many of those things that you like to see in a successful student are indeed metacognition? And Wendy, you can holler out words, I guess.
Yep. So Dawn says, again, asking questions.
Okay, questioning.
Being engaged in collaborative when they ask higher level questions, from Chantal.
Okay. Did the work through failure show up?
Answering their own questions.
Failure.
Yeah. Talking out loud to themselves about thought processes. Self-correction.
That's a good one.
When they make connections between phenomenon. Stating where they are confused.
Okay. It seems like we seem to have a connection then between what we view as success and what we view as metacognitive traits. And that's really what I wanted us to recognize or to think about. And then the other one would be, what benefits are your students going to get from thinking metacognitively? Are we just talking about better grades? That's it?
They become thinkers instead of listeners. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, if folks wanted to, if anybody had something really important that they wanted to share, felt like that they weren't capturing it through Wendy's, mediator, then feel free to open up a microphone. I usually don't sit and listen to myself talk for this long.
Being comfortable now knowing the answer and being willing to develop the skills to gain the knowledge, apply current understanding to novel situations. So not just a nice big grade, high grade. Higher communication skills with peers.
So looking at that list, I guess I'm thinking of how many of those things are traits and characteristics that we as teachers model for our students. And a lot of our metacognition really comes from recognizing that we needed to share more of our thinking process as teachers with the students. And we'll see several examples of that as we move into specific examples.
And I think this is also something that we do with modeling, more comfortable not knowing the answers, but probably be comfortable finding the answers and deeper understanding of content.
All right. So as long as we have those recorded in the chat,
yep,
I feel good. All right. So what is metacognition? Other than that fancy definition that we have, let's take that definition apart. All right. So this is from Marzano. Knowledge about oneself, knowledge about the thinking process, and then how to regulate the thinking process. Those are the three components, according to Marzano, of metacognition. And I once heard a story about where the word comes from, or I read this. And some of you may find this worth sharing. A meta, M-E-T-A, in Roman times, the meta was it was the name for the spot where the chariot races turned around and came back. So you would drive your chariot out to the meta, turn around and come back. And so I think it kind of comes from the recognizing, well, now it's time to come back to what I've been doing. So Marzano then divides things up into the self-knowledge, what I do know, metacognitive knowledge, what I can do to help gain understanding, and then self-regulation is, did I do it? Did it work? So I think this is a pretty good synopsis, probably more useful than that fancy definition from Taylor. But what do I know? What do I don't know? What I can do to help gain understanding. And then the reflection of saying, well, did I do it? Did it work? Well, let's take each of these apart. There's the self-knowledge. It has two components, commitment and attitude. Commitment, you recognize that learning is a matter of deliberate choice, not feelings. And we'll talk a little bit later about the affective domain. I think most of us are familiar or should be familiar with the cognitive domain, but there's a whole other one of Bloom's works that was the affective domain. And this is where this falls into commitment and attitude. Metacognitive knowledge, attention. This is the other component of self-knowledge. Attention. Attention to detail, big picture. All right. Commitment, attitude, attention. Now with metacognitive knowledge, three types of metacognitive knowledge. Declarative knowledge, that's the facts. Those would be formulas, things that you do to demonstrate that your knowledge. And then you have procedural knowledge. Those are the steps necessary to complete a task. And I think sometimes math teachers probably demonstrate this to perhaps too much of a degree at times, where they really focus on, this is how you get it done. Let's not think about what we're doing and just get it done. In modeling instruction, at least in chemistry, I know we spend a lot of time talking about making sure we don't end up with an algorithmic solution or approach. That would be something strictly procedural. And then conditional is when you use the skill. So you have to not only know how to complete the task, but you have to know, well, when to recognize what the tasks are. And then finally, you have the self-regulation component. And it's perhaps the most important, maybe the most often overlooked one, trying to make sure that our students stop and think about what they're doing. Planning, monitoring, and evaluating. So our program that we put together used this as a framework to try to, I don't know, cover all our bases. And that's what we'll talk about the rest of the time, is what we did. So I'll return to this diagram several times as we move between the components. We're going to talk about the self-knowledge first, and then there's the other two components that we won't talk about right now. Self-knowledge. All right. These are the things that we use metacognitive strategies in the realm of self-knowledge. Some of you may already recognize these or may already be doing things like this. There's an idea of mindset. It's become real popular lately. Carol Dweck's work, and we'll talk about that. Grit, Angela Duckworth, her work. Commitment, attitude, attention. This is that idea of the affective domain. And then some work on how you learn, how you develop intellectually, memory strategies. So these are all the activities that we try to apply. Some of them we do better than others. And here's an example. All right. So what this looks like is in our homeroom classes on Mondays, we have what's called Metacognitive Monday. And we'll have a lesson in one of the metacognitive strategies. And then we'll apply that lesson during the week. And so if you recall, we got four classes of freshmen. So I have 4 homeroom teachers. Each of the homeroom teachers teaches a different discipline. We got an English teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, and what did I miss? English, science, math, English, and the history teacher. So the application of the metacognitive strategy will be different in every class because it's a different discipline. So we'll take a metacognitive strategy that I'll apply in science and apply it one way. History, she'll apply it the other way. Math, a different way. English, a different way. But we're always bringing our students back to the idea that, oh, remember we talked about this in homeroom. We talked about this in Pulse. And here's an example of how to apply it. And it's worked out pretty well because the 4 team teachers for freshmen, and the sophomores work the same way. We all have the same lesson plan to present the lesson. But of course, we're 4 different teachers, 4 different experiences, 4 different disciplines. So we all put our little twist on it. And the other nice thing about it is that each homeroom class has a particular set of students. Now, those students aren't together for their discipline classes. So in my science class, second block, I'm going to have students that are in each of the different homerooms. So each of the different homeroom teachers gave a little different spin on the lesson. And so it's an opportunity to bring everybody back together and put it under a different umbrella 4 different times, each one of the classes. So we try to do that on Wednesdays. We have our metacognitive Mondays, and then we come back and visit them on Wednesdays. And then in our classes, whenever it comes up, we try to recognize this is a metacognitive moment. Oh, we're doing this, and don't you remember in Pulse we did this? So mindset. This would be a slideshow I would show our students on Monday. I pulled a couple of slides out of it to show 25-minute lesson in mindset. This is what the students would see. I talked to them about the idea of being born with intelligence, a fixed intelligence measured with an IQ test. No matter how much you learn, how hard you work, intelligence stays the same. There's a picture of Alfred Binet, who developed some of the early IQ tests. Today's theory, and again, this is a presentation to students. Mindset matters. Distinguishing feature of genius is their passion and dedication. And then we would have a particular activity, and in this case, there's a quiz that's called a mindset quiz. And the students would take that and try to gauge where their mindset is, whether or not it's a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And it comes out of Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. She's a professor of psychology at Stanford. And what she talks about is growth mindset is what you want. Because a growth mindset, you're going to stretch yourself, you're going to take risks, you're going to accept feedback, take a long-term view. In the long run, you're more likely to achieve your goals. And what you really want to stress to students is the brain is malleable. It's a muscle, and too often they think, "Oh, I'm not successful because I just don't know how to do this." And you really want to get them to thinking about hard work is what pays off. And this is an example of some of the questions from the mindset quiz. The entire quiz is 20 questions. This is just a set of them. And each one of these questions, the student will answer strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And then they'll do the test. We'll show how to score it, and then we'll talk about their scores and talk about where on the spectrum between growth and fixed mindsets they are. Another important thing with working with metacognition is you want to reflect on the tool. And so it's one thing, oh, here, take this test and sum it up, and that's what you are. But what we try to do is make sure they go back and try to identify, even before they answer the question, looking at these questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which ones exhibit a growth mindset and which ones exhibit a fixed mindset. And again, I'm not looking at the chat, but let's take the first one. Intelligence is something people are born with. It can't be changed. Fixed or growth. Hopefully you see that's a fixed mindset. No matter how intelligent you are, you can always be more intelligent. Growth mindset. You can always substantially change how intelligent you are. Growth mindset. You are a certain kind of person and there's not much you can do about that. Fixed mindset. The harder you work, the better you'll be at it. Growth mindset. Truly smart people do not need to try hard. Fixed mindset.
So this is a remark from Ariel. So looking at the different components of metacognition, she wonders if students who have executive functioning challenges also struggle with metacognition. If so, do you have any particular strategies to help those students assess metacognition?
Yeah, we'll talk about the strategies in just a little bit. In fact, that's what we've started with, the mindset. Executive function shows up under that category of the metacognition. Some people use that expression, executive function. But yeah, those would be the students that would struggle with that. And I don't know, Ariel, in terms of a specific strategy for executive function, I think going to the third category, the one that is the reflective category, that's where you need to get them to spend a lot of time either journaling, asking the question about, was I successful? What did I do to be successful? Why wasn't I successful? Those are the ways you can try to get them to recognize where they're missing out on the executive function. And we'll come back and summarize all the strategies. And at that point, you may want to ask the question again, and perhaps you'll see a strategy that is highlighted. So we'll do this with the freshmen really quickly after they get to our school. Within the first 2 weeks, we have the first 2 weeks we call it a special name, and our school is Wake Early College, so it's WEX, WECHS. So the first 2 weeks in the freshmen, we call it WEX Way, and we pretty much tell admin, you can't come in and bother our students. We have them for 2 weeks. You can't ask them to go get a student ID. You can't have them. They can't miss Pulse. Every day we're going to do something, and this is one of the things we do in the first 2 weeks. We sometimes refer to it as drinking the Kool-Aid. We bring them in and try to get them to drink the Kool-Aid in those first 20 days, first 2 weeks, 10 days. And this is one of the things that we have them do. And again, we'll do this on a Monday. We'll come back and visit it on a Wednesday. And then in class, each of their classes on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, teachers can refer to it. We've all taught the lesson on Monday. It's all fresh in our mind. And ideally, what you see is students saying, oh, that's a this, or oh, that's a that, or oh, they're just demonstrating a growth mindset. And it becomes part of the lexicon of our school. So again, this is going back to the presentation I would share with students. Step one for developing a growth mindset, learn, learn, learn. Step two, realize that hard work is the key. And step three would be face setbacks. And I think if we go back to our list that we've made so far, characteristics and trait, what metacognition looks like, what are students getting out of metacognition, these would be it. What do we call learn, learn, learn? What is it? Self-motivated, self-regulating learner. Someone that does the work, somebody that faces setbacks, criticism, and responds with improvements. So all of this is part of developing a growth mindset. All right. So that was our first strategy, the mindset quiz. The second strategy, as an example, would be the affective domain or the learning domains. Now, probably most of you talk to your students about the cognitive domain. That's Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive domain, the revised Bloom's, the pyramid, all of those things. But I'm not sure very many of us spend time talking about the affective domain. But there was a whole other set of papers comes out of Bloom's group that is called the affective domain for learning. And it's about attitudes, beliefs, and values. And again, we would spend a lesson on Monday and a follow-up on a Wednesday presenting this information to students. And this is part of the slideshow that they would see in that 25 minutes. Here's the taxonomy of the affective domain. We've already talked to them about cognitive domain, so they're familiar with this idea of pyramid going from top to bottom. And we'll talk about the receiving. With the receiving, you got a willingness to learn, a willingness to hear, selected attention. Examples would be listening to others with respect, listen for and remember the name of the newly interested people. And so the work that we'll do with them would be, excuse me, almost like you do a Bloom's taxonomy where you give them the verbs and try to say, where are you on the taxonomy? We'll give them the behaviors and, almost like a matching. You can sort and match and say, well, where on the pyramid do these behaviors go? But it works very much like the cognitive domain type work. Keywords for receiving would be asking, choosing, describing. Then you move up the pyramid to responding. And that's active participation on the part of the learners. They're not just receiving, they're responding. And the key examples of there would be participating in class, being engaged in class, questioning, asking not only questions of the teacher, but each other, answering, assisting, aiding. This would be partially peer teaching would fall into here to some extent. And then when you move beyond that, up the pyramid, we go to organizing. And here they're organizing values and priorities, resolving conflicts, creating unique value system. Examples would be accepting responsibility for behavior, reflecting on whether or not you get things done, accepting criticism, let's see, keywords, adherence, alteration, arranging, combining, integrating, modifying. And then you move up the pyramid to valuing. And this, I think in some respects, Ariel, this might be more what you're thinking, more what you're thinking about with respect to executive function. When they start getting up in these higher levels, that's when they really start to understand the value of having those, being able to do those tasks, being able to reflect, being able to ask questions.
Yes, Stephen, I'm sorry to chime in here. I was thinking even just getting to that organizing level for many kids with executive functioning challenges, that is going to be the beginning of their struggle before they can even get to the valuing and then internalizing. They can mostly, I would believe, do receiving and some responding, but beyond that, it's really, really hard for them. So this is great, and I'm loving the visual and finding ways. So, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, this idea of affective, and again, it goes back to your English classes too, because this really helps them recognize the difference between effect and affect, because you're going to say affect a whole bunch of times. And recognize how the word differs, because they're used to using it in a different way, effect and affect, but this is where it comes from. And then finally, the last category would be the internalizing. And that's acting consistently, value system that controls your behavior, pervasive, consistent, predictable. Let's see, examples, show self-reliance, displays teamwork, objective approach to problem solving, professional commitment to ethical practices. And again, these are all categories that we would spend time talking with this student. What I'm spending 5 minutes talking with you about would be a 25-minute lesson and then a follow-up lesson on a Wednesday where we'd come back to it. And so you got about an hour's worth of instruction in this. And that's where we one of the things we recognized early on was individuals of us were doing pieces of this in our classes. And so, you take something like concept mapping, which we'll talk about its place inside here. One of us would teach concept mapping, and then another one might not teach it. But then we were recognizing, well, it's taking away from our content discipline or content time. And so we said, well, let's take all of those strategies for learning, put them together under one umbrella, and then apply them across the board. And that's, again, it freed up time in each one of our classes because we weren't doing it individually. We were doing it during homeroom on 2 days a week. So that's the kind of the capstone for effective domain will be journaling. Each one of our Pulse classes has a journal that they start as a freshman, and then when they'll stay with the same 9th grade Pulse teacher or homeroom teacher all year, and then when they go to 10th grade, they'll take the journal with them, and it just builds up from what they did as a sophomore. And we try Fridays particularly, or sometimes on every other Thursday, we have a reflection day, and they'll talk about reflection on their grades. But at the end of some of the particular presentations that we do, we'll have them journal about certain things that we learned. This would be one of the questions: how have your attitudes about the relevance of the course material changed? How the contents and skills you've learned in this course might be relevant to other courses. And one of the advantages we have, because we're a small school, we only have about 75 to 80 freshmen. And so each homeroom teacher will only have around 18 or 20 of these. And it's not a hard thing to take a moment and look at their reflections and give them some feedback. On the bi-weekly basis, we actually have it set up to where freshmen do reflections on one week and sophomores do reflections on the other week. And the principal goes and looks at the reflections and provides the students feedback, which, again, is a little bit unheard of. So every weekend, the principal would sit down and look at about 75 to 80 pieces of paper and say, oh, yeah, I like what you're doing here, or maybe you should work more here. And again, it's the personal touch that being in a small school lets you have. All right. So another strategy is grit. And if I had a way to have you raise your hand, I'd say raise your hand if you've heard of grit. And my guess would be a lot of hands probably got popped in the air. We started looking at grit about 5 years ago when we first started developing this program. And 2 years ago, our county caught up to us, and now they have everybody looking at grit. But when we first looked at this metacognitive program, it was one of the things that bubbled to the surface pretty early. So grit comes out of work of Angela Duckworth. And so I'm going to see whether or not this works. Let me know if it's working for you. I'm going to watch it, and I may have to move it over to where you see it. I'm going to skip the video. All right. So, Wendy, can we take a moment, and can people see the video?
Yes, I think everybody is seeing what I see. So it's YouTube. Okay. We subscribe to that channel. So. So this is something that on a Monday, our students will watch this video
We'll have some questions, we'll have some discussion in the video, and then we'll come back on Wednesday and talk about it one more time. And then each day in class that week, we'll try to have metacognitive moments where we focus on what we saw in the video.
We hear it very vaguely. I think it just comes through your microphone.
So you can't hear the video? You can't hear the audio?
No.
I can turn the words on. Can you see the words now?
Yes. And I think
Okay.
at the end, when you give out the slides, if you can give us the link, then everybody can watch it on their own computer.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll stop it there, and I think you can recognize perhaps the value that this would have on a 14 and 15-year-old mind, or 13 and 14. First time that they have heard this. And again, it's in the context of a 25-minute lesson, a follow-up lesson 2 days later, and then all of our content classes, teachers in 9th grade, can return and talk about that, not only that week, but from then on. And what you end up hearing is conversations in the lunchroom about grit, about the value of it and which students have it, which students don't, and starting to recognize how important it is. Sort of makes you stop and think, doesn't it? All right. So let's do our second little component of metacognition, which would be the metacognitive knowledge part. Okay. And this is something that I don't know, not necessarily passionate, that might be too strong a word, but I talk to my students a lot about this idea that I got a teacher toolbox and I got a bunch of stuff in the toolbox. And everything that I do in class reflects what I pull out of the toolbox and I want them to learn from. And I try to get them to start thinking about, why is he having us do this? Why are we doing that? And sometimes I'll specifically ask a question on a chemistry activity where it says, okay, well, why did we look at it this way? Why didn't we do that? And this is where Bloom's taxonomy would come in, the Socratic method, constructivism, inquiry. Those are all the tools that we talk about. And again, I don't know if each one of these would be a separate lesson. We may talk about learning styles, not styles, but methods of learning like constructivism, certainly to understand inquiry. But I want them to reflect on what tool I'm using and why. And here's a selected strategy for metacognitive knowledge. Some of these you'll recognize. These are reading strategies. This comes out of our English teacher, that ACA class, the beginning class that talks to them about how learning happens. Note taking and summarizing, questioning. These are pretty standard skills. I think we spend a lot of time in areas like this trying to help them with their metacognitive knowledge, concept maps, study guides, learning objectives. These are all things that we're probably familiar with. So we'll hit on a couple of them. Another activity for you, and I'm not sure how well it'll work. I'm going to go through it. This is the way I would do it with my students, and you can keep track at home. You ready? Okay. Tried to get my animations right. Okay. So there we go. I'm going to put a list of words up, and you're going to tell me how many vowels you can count, and the words are arranged in alphabetical order. You're going to have 20 seconds to perform the task. On your mark, get set, go. All right, there's your 20 seconds. So without looking at the list, write down as many words as you can remember. You got 30 seconds to do this. And again, this is how we would do it exactly like this in class. Every Pulse teacher, we have 4 teachers doing this at once on a day. And hopefully you recognize that what the difference is, I changed the objective. I told them to do something, and then I said, oh yeah, but this is what I really want to do today. So we're going to repeat the assignment this time, but this time you know you're going to memorize the words. All right, go. Yeah, that wasn't 30 seconds, but I'll make the list go away. And I would have them write their words down. Now, I'm going to show you the list one more time. But this time, I rearranged the words in a logical pattern. So you got 30 seconds to review the list, but I would encourage you first, find the pattern. It's numeric order. $1 bill, 2 dice, 3 tricycle, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 15. So we talk a lot with them about what I think all of us probably put learning objectives up at the beginning of the day, of the period. But the kids just kind of gloss over them or don't really spend time looking at them. But the idea would be you really need to look at the learning objective to understand what is it that we're trying to get you to understand. Because in this particular activity, you may have thought that I was asking you to write down vowels, but what I really wanted you to do was memorize the words. That's one thing that we do with them. Another one is this, it's called MSL, Motivated Strategies for Learning. And MSL is a test that was put together, or it's a survey that was put together to try to recognize how students feel about learning and how they're learning strategies. And it has a lot of depth to it. I didn't include any of the questions in here, but in the references, I'll make sure that I give you what we do. But it really is an opportunity to think about how you learn things and why you learn things. It's called Motivated Strategies for Learning. Another one is we talked with them about assignment for learning objectives. I think some of you that have been in my chemistry class, or Ariel and Teresa would have seen something along these lines, trying to get them to focus on what we did, what you learned, based on our learning objectives. Metacognitive anchoring is another skill. There's the source for that. The student highlighted this text, and then we want them to ask some questions during the reading, and then they want to ask, not answer the question, but ask why they asked that question. Try to get them to think again about why they did that question. I think most of us probably do these first two things where you're reading and then try to think of question. But now ask them to think about why you asked that question. All right. So our last category is the self-regulation. And here's some of our tasks for self-regulation or our activities. A lot of journaling. What did you do now? Did I know what I thought I knew? Plan for learning. We'll go through a couple of these as examples. This is one I really like. I'm going to have you do this particular activity. So read this to yourselves. Now answer these questions. And how similar is that to what we do with students all the time with scientific vocabulary? They might as well be reading the thing on the left if they don't understand the words. But this is a good activity to highlight to them. Again, I read something, but did I understand the words? Well, I read that first sentence. It's very important you learn about traxylene. I need to stop and figure out what traxylene is. I need to understand what montylation is. And it's a fun activity to do with them. Learning cycle. If you use the learning cycle, this is a way to incorporate learning cycle with the idea of metacognition. So you're starting with an experience. Those of us that do science, here's our paradigm lab. Then you have to have time to think about the experience. I think some of us recognize that a lot of times students need a period to think about what the lab was before you can come back and ask them a lot of questions about it. They need to digest it. And then you have to have them formalize what they're learning and then how to make improvements in it. Well, you want to have to talk about the metacognition component of each one of those pieces of their learning cycle. Metacognitive questioning chart, where they're looking at the type of thinking that they used, not so much the questions that they asked, but the kind of thinking that they used. This is another one we do in that first 2 weeks, the 5 whys. Some of you may have heard of this strategy before. We ask them, why are you here at the school? So I could pose the question to those that are still in the seminar right now. Say, why are you attending the seminar? And you write an answer. And then the follow-up question is, why did you answer the question that way? And you give them a few minutes to do that. And you say, well, I'm going to ask you a very important question now, which is, why was the answer to the second question what it was? And this is a way to get them to really think deeply about why they do what they do. It's called 5 whys. And you want them to answer pretty quickly, 30 seconds per question. Again, we'll come back to journaling. They do a lot of journaling, and I'll take time to read some of the journaling, talk to students individually. The cartoon that I enjoy. I taught him how to whistle. I don't hear him whistling. Well, I didn't say he learned it. How often is that the case? So what are we doing? I think I highlighted most of these things that we're doing. We have an embedded metacognitive curriculum. These are some of the buzzwords or the things that you can see out on the web. There's a program called Learning How to Learn, a program called Habits of Mind, programs called Thinking Skills. We kind of put all of these together and made our own hybrid program, again, based on our experience, our students, our school, what we have. Each of the 4 teachers on the freshman team developed 2 lessons, and the lessons are distributed among the team. Each lesson is taught concurrently during a homeroom. And then this was the first year, and then the sophomores came in the second year. And so, you do it 1 year, share the wealth, and then it stays the same. The sophomore lessons are different than the freshman lessons. Sophomores spend a lot more time talking about career goals, getting ready for college. So this would be a metacognitive strategy that you can use. What are the 3 most important ideas you learned from this webinar? Some of you may already use session wrappers in class. A lot of times we call them ticket out the door. But then the follow-up would be answer the question for them. This is what you thought. Well, this is what I thought. Teachers should explicitly teach metacognition. Metacognition should be taught using a framework. And then teachers should demonstrate that they value metacognitive thinking. So when you do the session wrappers or when you do the ticket out the door, spend some time talking about, well, this is what I thought was important. Sometimes I'll avoid writing a learning objective for the day, and then have them write their own learning objectives and say, what was it that we were learning today? And then I'll check and say, oh yeah, that's what we were learning. So hopefully we achieved our objectives. Ask yourself, do you understand metacognition a little better now? I know there's a lot of information on it. It's a pretty big topic. Gave you hopefully some ideas about skills and strategies. And then I showed you how we did it at our school. It may not work for your school, but this is how we did it based on our experience. All right. Any questions? I will go back to show the chat, I guess. I think I will. Wendy, how do I get my chat to pop up?
I don't know. It's on the...
There it goes. I got it.
Okay.
I got it, yeah.
So Chantel said...
I can't find it.
Okay. Chantel, thank you for your time and presentation. She learned a lot.
So again, if anybody wants to ask questions, you can turn the mic off and we have a conversation.
Yep, you can turn it on. Yep, turn
I can certainly stay. I can stay longer than 8 o'clock unless Wendy kicks me out.
No, I'm fine. It's going to be 5 for me, so.
Oh yeah. You're going to miss traffic.
I work from home, so no traffic at all. So.
Oh, that's true.
Don
my daughter was in Charlotte over the weekend.
Oh.
Got to see her. She came over. They were doing a workshop, an ASU workshop over in Charlotte at public schools.
Oh, nice.
So I got to spend Saturday with her.
Yeah. It's going to be 90 by the end of this week. So, so Don asked.
It's supposed to snow here tomorrow, I think.
Don asked if there's a good resource that explains the strategies further, including additional ones not described here.
I think that combination of and I'll put the resources that I have, I'll make them available to Wendy.
And I'll share.
The learning how to learn, the habits of mind, use those buzzwords when you do a Google search, learning how to learn, habits of mind. There's a really big program of habits of mind. I think it's Costa, C-O-S-T-A is the person who developed it. There's several universities now that have learning how to learn programs. And then thinking skills is another one. But yeah, I'll give you my set of references and you can chase them down from there. But is there any one program that shows you everything? No, that's the problem. Everything is pretty specific to where it was developed. And so I think that is the key, is to spend some time looking at what you need and then pick apart the pieces. The other one, what is the other one that I can't think of it now? There's another high school program that it's included in the references, which just doesn't come to mind right now.
So Michelle says that she is going to take this to her administration, and somebody from Arkansas, I don't know who that is, there's no first name, the presentation reminded the person of some strategies that he or she needs to revisit.
Yeah, again, I think that's a lot of it. I think many of us are doing these things. And like I said before, we were doing them individually as teachers in our freshman team, but we put them all under one umbrella and made it more effective, because now everybody's doing the same thing on the same day, and we can all talk about it. We're building our lexicon of metacognition together as a group, and it's worked out well for us.
Do you know of people who do or who use a similar program in larger schools? The high schools here, they have sometimes 3,000 students. Changes everything.
Yeah, I know they use it in colleges and universities, but now I think the trick with universities is often, they have like an ILC or some kind of, like our ACA class where they have a freshman experience where students come in. And so I think that's an advantage if you have a class like that, where all of your freshmen can drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. And again, we have that. Some of the things that we can't fit into our homeroom class, the English teacher will fit into that class. It would certainly pose a different set of challenges because you have so many students that you're dealing with. So I could see where that would make it difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know of anyone in particular that's, this is a great, do what they did.
So Ariel asked if it was a top-down initiative or was it teacher-driven? If top-down, did all teachers respond positively?
Teacher-driven. Yeah, teacher-driven. Yeah, we started it based on our summer work. Some of us stay and get a little bit of summer money for about a month, and so that's where it started from that. And it wasn't a hard sell to our admin. Now, of course, being an admin person, they're very data-driven. So the harder sell is, like all educational research, how do you monitor success? How is it that we can say, it seems to be working? Do we have fewer students coming back from North Campus, fewer students not passing a college class with a C or better to get transferable credit? Those are ways that we can measure it, and we seem to be seeing modest improvements there. But sitting in the lunchroom, listening to students talk, do we feel like our students are much more aware of what we're doing? Yes. Can we have conversations with our students that we couldn't have before about the learning process? Or whenever we sit students intentionally and I mix groups and say, okay, I got a high flyer, medium, and a low flyer, can I actually talk to them and say, this is a strategy, this is why I do it, we call it peer instruction. This is how you do peer instruction. Another example is, I think, how many of us ask our students to collaborate, but how often do we teach what good collaboration looks like? That's a metacognitive thing, to know what it looks like. Again, you have to be as intentional as possible. Open that teacher toolbox and let them see what you're doing. Yeah. One of the things we've thought about doing it, and I think maybe I'll try to do it next year. I don't know how many of you do end of course evaluations. We have another thing that's called walkthroughs. It's a something that came out of the Jobs for the Future and the North Carolina New Schools, where sometimes I'll walk into a class. Every teacher is required to walk into a class a couple times a week. 5 minutes, that's it, and you make a little snapshot of what's going on. And then we put that data together, and if you have enough visits, the data show, you can see that you're not doing this very well. And it's not evaluative. It's just a snapshot of the kind of practices you're doing. Well, we want to try to get our students to start doing that, to where there's a moment in class where the announcement comes over and says, okay, take a snapshot. And we have a group of students that we would train to do this, and the students up and say, okay, what have we been doing today? What have we been doing for the last 20 minutes? So rather than being me walk into a classroom and make it a snapshot, it'll be us asking the students, well, reflect for 30 seconds. Pull up your smartphone and answer a couple of questions about what have you been doing in class today? And we feel like as teachers, we're pushing back at admin because they have this, I walk into a classroom for 2 minutes and I'm supposed to know what's going on. Ask the students.
Yep.
What's going on?
Okay, are there any questions for Stephen?
Well, my email is there. Feel free to reach out to me individually. I don't at all guarantee that I'll respond to you, but at some point, probably the beginning of summer, I'll be happy to talk to you. But I think everybody else, things are pretty crazy right now. I'm trying to find the name of that one other program that has a lot. Gosh, it just can't think of the name of it. I'm pulling it up right now. I'm trying anyway. I'll include it in the list of resources if I can't find it. I don't see it in front of me readily. But it's you just type metacognition into Google and you'll get lots and lots of stuff. It's filtering through it that's kind of tough. And I think there's certainly the resources I will give you do a pretty good job of the initial filtering. But I think you'll all want to find things closer to home and more specific to your school. Yeah, I don't.
Thank you so much, Stephen. This was fabulous.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I know it was a lot, but hopefully we'll get something out of it.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, Wendy, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, and I will stop the recording. Everybody, thank you so much for staying the entire time. Stephen, thank you so much for doing the presentation. Did you have a question, Teresa?
You're welcome.
I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome. So I'll send you this. Yeah, what should I share with you, Wendy?
The slideshow, and then I have the recording, and I will share the chat.
Okay. Sounds great.
Okay. Then that should be available tomorrow or the day after. Depending.
I'm sure that I won't look at it anytime soon.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Stop the recording.
See you at graduation.
Yes.
We'll be out there the whole week of graduation, so I'll make sure.